afternoon. So happy to be here. Before I get started, I just want to recognize a few people that are here that are currently working with us here at St. George. So I know a few of them were introduced earlier, but I'll reintroduce them. So we have Chief Todd Morris, who is our newly elected Chief of Police in St. George. We have Councilwoman Patty Cook, newly elected as of May 3rd, serving the Shenandoah, White Oak area in our city. And we have Mr. Robert Douglas over here, who serves on our Board of Adjustments for the city of St. George. So a little bit about me, a little bit about my background. Not originally from here. I always like to tell people that I ended up here by accident. I moved up here for a teaching and coaching job in 2005, and I thought I was going to be here for a few short months. I was going to move back to New Orleans, get married, raise a family, live happily ever after. Well, I moved here August 1st of 2005, rented a 600 square foot apartment on Coursey Boulevard. 28 days later, everybody knows the story, Katrina happens. So 28 days later, I go from living by myself in a 600 square foot apartment to having my future father-in-law, 3 future brother-in-laws, 2 dogs, and my then fiance all living together. And that's how we managed to live for a period of 6 months that I think I intentionally choose to forget most of. So the story goes is that I wanted to leave teaching and coaching, get into the fire service. So I show up and take a test, and they say, who here wants their score sent to the St. George Fire Department? And everybody in the room raises their hand. I'd never heard of the department before, but I didn't want to be the odd duck. I raised my hand too. So take the test, pass. A few months later, I get offered a job, and I've been here ever since. Story, obviously continues. I get married, I have children. They went to St. George School. They're both in high school now. And it's been a true blessing to be part of this community for the past 20 years. This is home now. I always say I'm from New Orleans, but this is my home. This is where we plant roots. This is where we want to stay. And when people ask me about why I got involved with St. George in 2013, my answer always goes back to that. And they say, Dustin, why did you get involved with this? And I'll tell you why I got involved with it. At the time that this started, my children were 3 and 5. My daughter was 5 and my son was 3. And as I looked around the community and I had older relatives, and I'm sure a lot of y'all are in the same boat today, when you want to go see your children or want to see your grandchildren, you got to get in your car and cross state lines, or you have to hop in a plane to go do it. And in 2013, I thought we were given an opportunity and time to do something different in Louisiana and create some place for where our kids will have a future, a place where they can set their roots. So when they get older and they have children, that they have a place where they feel like it's truly home. And that's really why I got involved. There was no other reason. I can assure you this, I absolutely did not get involved in this to be the mayor. Okay? I have never had any ambitions in politics in my life. My ambition has been service. From the time I graduated high school, I was coaching. From the time I graduated college, I was in classrooms teaching and coaching. I worked at East St. John in Reserve. I worked at Woodlawn. When it was time for me to get out of teaching because I wanted to do something different, I entered the fire service. And even doing the whole St. George effort, it was really about service to me. It was about providing a certain level of service to the community that I thought that I was called to do. And that led me all the way up into the governor's appointment, really. 2 weeks prior to that appointment being made, I had a group of people say, Dustin, would you be interested in doing this? And I said, absolutely not. I said, no. So, a few days later, they came back and said, no, we really would like you to consider doing this. And I said, I don't know, but still no. Then they asked me a third time. I said, well, look, this is the way it'll happen. I said, what do I need to do? They said, well, you need to send in a resume and all these things. I said, okay, fine, I'll do that. I said, but I'm not going to make one phone call. I'm not asking anybody for this. I said, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And if I'm asked to do this, then I'll do the same thing that I've done the last 20 years, and that's serve the community. As the story goes, May 13th of last year, I'm sitting in my living room, get a phone call. Mr. Yates is the governor's office. I said, okay. He said, the governor would like to appoint you to be the first, interim mayor for St. George. Would you accept? I looked at my wife, and, we had already talked about it, obviously, and I accepted it. And I can tell you this, too, with certainty, that my life hasn't been the same one day since then. From May 14th of last year up until today, every day has been a new adventure. Every day has been something different. And truly, it's been a great experience. It really has. I've got to meet so many different people from so many different walks of life. I had no idea that there were so many engineers in the East Baton Rouge area. But I'm going to tell you, I can't walk into a room, I can't do anything without running into 12 engineers. They're everywhere. But all in all, it's been truly a wonderful experience. And to have the opportunity to do something from the beginning and start it out the way that we think would be best suited for not only St. George, but for this parish and region is a wonderful opportunity. It's also a tremendous responsibility. You know, I get this question a lot, especially in the very beginning. They would say, where do you start? I said, man, if you find that answer out, I said, let me know because I'd love to hear it. You know, there's really no rule book on this. And people say, well, Central Incorporated 20 years ago. I said, I understand Central Incorporated 20 years ago. I said, we're 3 or 4 times the size of Central. There's a lot more infrastructure here. There's a lot more moving pieces and parts. So even though some of those pieces can be replicated into what we're doing here, it's really a different animal altogether. So every day is something different. Every day is a new challenge. But what I like to say is, you know, with every challenge is an opportunity to come up with a wonderful solution. And that's really what we've been focused on. The city has been meeting, you know, having council meetings since last July. So we started out where we need to start out. And when you become a city, you don't have any of those things that every other city has. And one of the basic things is ordinances, right? So we had to start adopting ordinances and figuring out how we wanted, you know, the rules and regulations of our city to look like. So we started on that process. That moved into planning and zoning. That was always a big issue with residents of St. George. They were always upset that planning and zoning decisions were being made on their property by people that really didn't have a vested interest in St. George. They didn't live there. In their mind, a lot of decisions were made not in the best interest of those communities. So we got that ramped up last October, and since last October, we do all of our own permits, we do all of our own inspections. It's been a great process. In East Baton Rouge Parish, the standard timeline for an inspection is 10 days. If you pay extra, you can get an expedited process in 5 days. We don't have an expedited process. Our process is just 5 days. We've had some bumps in the road along the way, too. With anything new, you're always going to have that. But overall, it's been a really, really positive experience. Also a positive experience of getting to meet so many different homeowners. When people ask me what's been the most eye-opening thing for you so far, the one area I would say of government that I was probably least exposed to prior to taking on this role is planning and zoning. Okay? People are very, very passionate about their property, and more so, people are very, very passionate of what goes next to their properties, right? Lots of great conversations with all different types of people regarding planning and zoning. So like I said, that's been going since last October. We do our own, you know, we've already sent out our own occupational licenses and fees this past year. As of May, we have code enforcement now. So we have a group of people that are on the streets every day, code enforcement. So I tell everybody, I said, you better cut your grass. I said, you better pick up your trash. You better do the things that we said we're going to do because we're actually going to enforce it. Okay, so it's not something that we're doing code enforcement just to say that we're doing code enforcement. We want people to follow the rules. I've been told from the very beginning, from homeowners to developers to business folks, just tell us the rules and we'll follow them. Well, now's their time to prove it if they're going to actually follow those rules. And most people are doing great. That's been a really positive thing. So, you know, I guess the tail end piece of the planning and zoning is the administrative hearing process. So unlike the city of Baton Rouge, we don't have a city court. But what we do have is the administrative hearing process. So in the event that something happens where people want to appeal it, it goes through an administrative hearing process. There's an administrative hearing officer that essentially is like a judge, and they make a ruling on whatever type of issue that is. So that's kind of in a nutshell everything. There's a lot of other moving pieces and parts, but I know I'm limited on time, and I want to ask, you know, have y'all ask some questions here at the end. But, you know, what I truly want to talk to you about is that I honestly believe that we have this unique opportunity in time here in East Baton Rouge Parish. An extremely unique opportunity in time to do some really wonderful things, but some difficult decisions will have to be made along that way. Some things have to change. whether it's how we govern, how we fund things, all these things. In case you haven't noticed, and I've noticed, and I'm sure y'all have as well, the people are starting to tell government no, okay? We don't want to be taxed anymore. We don't want this to be done this way any longer, right? We've seen it in the last election cycle. I think it's been leading up to this point. So we have to, as governmental officials, elected officials, stewards of government, stewards of dollars, start finding alternative ways to do things here, okay? I'll give you an example. Law enforcement. I'm sitting here in front of the chief of police, so I'll steal his thunder here a little bit. But law enforcement, everybody wants to handle law enforcement a particular way, right? And they always say, well, we need 100 more deputies, we need 100 more of this, we need 100 more of that. Well, that's not that easy. You can't just snap your finger, can you, chief, and 100 new police officers show up. It's not the way that it works, okay? So instead of going down the same path that we've always gone down, and at the end of the day, we've always gotten the same results, why don't we choose a different route? Why don't we look at alternatives to that? Why don't we look at ways to maximize our technology that's out there? AI is doing some unbelievable things. Whether you've bought onto the AI train or not, I'm just going to tell you it's here, okay? And it can be maximized for a lot of great things in government, and it comes at a fraction of the cost. A fraction of the cost, okay? I would be lying to you if I told you that I don't use AI almost on a daily basis. Okay, it's almost silly not to at this point in the positions that we have. So that's what I kind of mean. Instead of coming up with the same solutions to the same problems that we know, they're easy, right? It's something that people have come up with before, but they haven't worked. We need to start looking at other things. When we start talking about infrastructure development, when we start talking about building buildings, eventually St. George is going to have to build something, right? We're going to have to, we'll take ownership over our roads. We'll have to build a city hall. Traditional municipal thought is, well, I'll just go take a bond out, or I'll raise a tax, or I'll go along those traditional lines, which puts my hand in your pocket, right? Or we could think a little bit differently. Why shouldn't we leverage some of our private partners that are in the room today? Why shouldn't we leverage their experience, their knowledge, their skill set, and bring that into the public world? It works everywhere else in the country. Everywhere else in the country is doing it, okay? And some elements in Louisiana were doing it. But I don't think we've even started to scratch the surface with that. We should be looking at that, okay? Because the alternative to these public-private partnerships is to grow government. Quick raise of hands. Who wants their government to be any bigger? Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Nobody wants to grow government, and nobody wants to grow government for a lot of different reasons. The reason I don't want to grow government is because it's unbelievably expensive to do so. Okay, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with it or not, East Baton Rouge Parish currently is buried in a lot of debt, of long-term liability debt that's tied into the growth of government. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, okay? I'm just saying how it is. And as a new city coming up and beginning from the beginning, we would be foolish to replicate that model. In fact, I would say that any new city today would be foolish to replicate that model. It's an older model. Okay, and I think the city of Baton Rouge and East Baton Rouge Parish is going to start coming up with some creative solutions to start working on that. I really believe that. Okay, but as a new city, we can't afford to do that. So we have to leverage our private partners. We have to leverage the people in our community. That's probably one of the biggest things that I've seen, and one of the ladies in the back, one of the reporters asked me about coming out to these community events, and why do I like doing it so much? Well, that's because this is where you're at. Okay, you're not in my office. Okay, you're not in my vehicle with me. You don't come home with me at night. This is where you're at. And the more people I meet, the more rooms that I get a chance to talk to, you know what I meet? I meet unbelievable people, okay, that are unbelievably talented, and everybody wants to be part of the solution. And you know what I'm told all the time? I want to be part of the solution, but I was never asked, okay? I want to be part of the solution, but I was never brought in. Well, St. George wants to bring you in. St. George wants you to be part of that solution. Okay, everybody here familiar with Keep Tigertown Beautiful? Okay, everybody knows Miss Jennifer, right? Okay, got a chance to meet her for the first time last week. What a firecracker. She's unbelievable. Okay, we would be foolish in the city of St. George not to partner with that lady. Okay, she knows where every pile of trash is in East Baton Rouge Parish. Okay, and not only that, she is already tied into all these volunteer resources that will come out and do it for free. They'll pressure wash. They'll clean. okay? She was actually telling me last election cycle, last fall, all of a sudden we start seeing street sweepers around, okay? And I remember joking with somebody, I said, must be election time. I see the street sweepers working. Well, that wasn't an election ploy. You know who that was? Jennifer, okay? She brought him in. She called him and said, hey, I need to get one street sweeper at Perkins and Segan. They sent 7 of them. And you know how much it cost the taxpayers? Nothing. Nothing. Okay? So those are the types of things that are already out there. And we already have these wonderful groups of people that just want to be part of the solution. Government has to get out of that way. We don't know everything. Trust me, I know that I don't. My wife and my kids remind me of this at least 12 times a day. I don't know everything. I never will. Okay? But if I cumulatively bring this group of people together, the residents of St. George together, the residents of East Baton Rouge Parish together, and we can work on some of these problems, then I think there's some real solutions that can be happen, not in 25 years or 50 years, but I believe in the next 4 or 5 years. And that's my focus. That's my aim with the city of St. George. You know, we're not only a city, okay, and not only just a beginning city, but I almost view St. George almost as a test lab. We have a blank slate, okay? And you got a guy in front of you here that's not afraid to fail, okay? Failing to me is never the end of the road. Failing to me is just I figured out it doesn't work that way, okay? But if we're afraid to fail, then we're also afraid to move forward. So I'm never afraid to fail, which means that I'm not afraid to try new things. I'm not afraid of criticism. I've been criticized for a lot of things, okay? That doesn't factor into me, okay? What factors into me is this: are we providing the very best service that we can to the residents of our area? Are we providing the very best that we can to St. George? Are we providing the very best that we can for East Baton Rouge Parish? And that should always be the aim. That should always be the focus, because a lot of times in government, especially when you get into these larger governments that have so many municipal employees, it turns in being more about the employees than it does about being about the resident of the city or a resident of the parish. And that's what we have to get back to. Okay, we have to realign our focus, and our focus should be on every neighborhood. We'll have a campaign at some point next year, and I don't know what we're going to call it. I'm not a marketing person, but in my mind, it's one intersection at a time, one street at a time, one neighborhood at a time. That's just for St. George, right? You know, people have this idea that St. George inherited this gold mine, that we have this endless surplus of funds, and everything is the best and nicest in St. George. We do have some nice areas. We do not have an endless supply of money, okay? So we have to manage some expectations with our residents, because as soon as the Supreme Court ruled, they wanted everything done the next day, right? So we have to manage some expectations, and we also have to prioritize what we want to do, okay? I can tell you right now, for sure, tops on my priority list of some things is Segan Lane and the interstate. Has to be fixed. Has to be fixed. Okay, there are so many problems there. I could waste a whole hour talking about the problems that are Segan Lane and the interstate. We have to start addressing some of those issues. I can't promise you everything that we're going to do is going to work. Okay, but we're going to figure out what does work. Okay, it might take a year, it might take 18 months, but we're not going to stop because it's important. Okay, it's important. Once we get that figured out, we're going to move on to the next one, and we're going to move on to the next one, and we're going to move on to the next one. Okay, my hopes is that we have, utilizing AI, by the way, we're going to have an open portal that's going to be very similar to like a work order system where everybody in the city is going to be able to see everything that's going on. Okay, they're going to be able to say, well, St. George owns 850 stop signs. These 3 stop signs are out. They click on it and it says, well, when's it scheduled to be fixed? Scheduled to be fixed on May 25th. Okay. For all the assets in the city, whether it be a stop sign, whether it be roadway lighting, whether it be striping on the road, whether it be curbs. I'm just going down a list of things that people complain to me about every day, okay? Whether it's when their trash is picked up, whether when the debris is going to be gone, all these things, right? Okay? So maximizing technology, maximizing the AI component in order to better serve you. Okay, it's going to be a better service to you. It's going to be more accessible to you, and at the end of the day, it's going to be as transparent as we can possibly make it. Okay, I'll wrap it up here. I got the 10-minute mark, and then we'll open up for questions. And I generally like to end these things. If you heard me talk, you've probably heard this before, but I'll say it again. You know, in my purview, there's 2 different types of governments that we could have. Anywhere really, and you can have a government of probability or you can have a government of possibility. And what we are used to especially in Louisiana, is that we're used to governments of probability. Okay, and what I mean by that is this. We do things because it's probably been done before. It's probably safe. Okay, I'm probably not going to get criticized too much for this. I'm probably going to get reelected if this happens. Okay, it's probably going to work. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But what I am saying is this: when you settle for the government of probability, you miss out on the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is a government of possibility. Okay, what is actually possible in local government? What's possible for East Baton Rouge Parish? What's possible for the city of St. George? And if we're not willing to learn, if we're not willing to fail, if we're not willing to push the envelope, if we're not willing to put our own selves into those solutions, then we're never going to experience what's truly, truly possible for the residents of this parish. So thank you all for having me here today. I'm more than happy to answer whatever questions that y'all might have, as long as I know the answer. If I don't, I'll tell you. I think the other way. There you go.
Robin Telebady. Thank you for your words. You and I have lived in the community about the same time, 20 years. I don't live in St. George. And so there's this phrase that's out there, the legacy debt, not talking about the date you started, but the legacy debt. That during these 20 years, decisions have been made by our government, good or bad, including pensions, the police, and all that. And there's debt that has happened during our time. So now, at this point, it feels as if I'm being asked to pay the debt for your family and your neighbors. And so what I'm curious about is, how do we deal with the legacy debt that appears not to be assumed by St. George, but placed on those of us outside of St. George, especially as we try to move forward as a neighborhood, as a community. And so maybe this perception is wrong, that you all are actually in conversation with the mayor to try to, I don't even know how mathematically you figure that out.
It's a good question.
So it's messy. It would be lovely to just start new without all the debt for these last decades. But how do we deal with that responsibly? So I just honestly, it's not a trick question.
No, it's not a trick question at all. I can answer that one for you. Part of the negotiations with the city parish was kind of twofold. So the first one was just the basic intergovernmental agreement that just dealt with 2024 Supreme Court ruling date moving forward. And then there'll be multiple other agreements that'll have to be made. The legacy is part of it as well. So legacy cost, dealing with pension liability, as well as some OPEB cost. But all that also has to be factored into assets. So one of the things that people don't like to talk about is that there's assets here as well to go along with liabilities. My suggestion has always been, it's the same suggestion that I give the school system, that you truly need a third-party evaluator to come in and actually see what the cost is. Once the evaluation is done, whatever that number is, the number is. Whatever we have to pay in, we pay in. But I'm not assuming that cost. I want it to be done the right way, because at the end of the day, I represent 90,000 people that have also been paying into the same system you've been paying into. So some of those assets that have been built over time, even in the city of Baton Rouge, have been built by taxpaying dollars in the city of St. George. So that was obviously one of the issues that came up, that spurned part of this incorporation movement. But no, none of that is off the table. That is still very much an active conversation and will be handled appropriately. Yes, sir.
Hello, Mayor. Great seeing you again. Great speech, by the way. I was not going to say anything until you brought it up.
Okay.
But I am the guy with the elite waist, with the street sweeper.
My man. That's it. That's right. This is the guy that showed up with the 7 street sweepers, right?
7 street sweepers. And so my goal, right, I'm really big on keeping my community clean. So what are you guys doing? How are we implementing, I guess, the solution to getting street sweepers in the city of St. George, and the time frame?
Well, I mean, I think the easiest thing for me to do is just call Elite and have them show up, or I'll just call Jennifer and see what she can work out for us. Look, being in this new role and position, I look at the world differently. And what I mean by that is that every time I drive, my focus is somewhere different. So I notice every blade of grass that's out of line. I notice every busted curb. But you know what else I notice? I notice all the areas that need street sweeping. So that will absolutely be a part of our public works effort. We haven't put the RFP out yet for public works. We will put that out probably in the next 30 days. But don't be surprised if we don't put something out sooner than that, specifically about street sweeping. So I'm glad you're here, man. If I would have known, I would have recognized you.
Resident of St. George, Ralph May. I noticed since something's changed with the hot rodders and a lot of the car racing, what have you done differently to help it?
I can't say that I've personally done anything with the hot rod stuff. I mean, I know that there was a big issue probably, Todd, 12, 18 months ago. We had a lot of issues with it. I can tell you one spot, Blue Bonnet in Jefferson, it looked like they had a drag race that went around in circles about 100,000 times right there. I don't know if it's something different that law enforcement officials are necessarily doing.
Well, they try to do some proactive measures when they see they're going to muster up at the night before through intelligence. They try to be there, and the city police and sheriff's office try to intervene those and keep those from happening. So they've tried to be proactive about that. And it just kind of comes in spurts. Really, now that summertime's coming about, you may see an uptick in that. We usually do that. It's coming now, but they're trying to be proactive with intelligence to disrupt that prior to them, getting 100 or 200 people at an intersection to shut it down.
Would you repeat that answer, please?
Chief, right here.
Would you paraphrase what he said?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, our law enforcement partners try to get a kind of I guess through intelligence, they figure out kind of where they're going to be located at and try to intervene prior to it actually being an event.
4 years from now, your term will be a success if?
That's a great question. 4 years from now, my term will be a success when we have our own school system. 4 years from now, my term will be a success when we do something with our public works as far as actually prioritizing and developing a plan to deal with all of our maintenance issues, primarily in the drainage realm, because that's probably the number one thing that people talk to me about all the time. 4 years from now, I would consider my term a success if we actually put something out there that works and we can have a positive impact on some of the homelessness issues that we have here through a comprehensive plan. I think that would probably be the tops of my priority list. Thanks for that question. Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Right on time. Okay, one more. Last question.
I wasn't going to say anything, you just said homeless issue. So one of the questions that I have is most of the homeless shelters are in mid-city or in the city of Baton Rouge. There are no homeless shelters or facilities in St. George, or the next town will be New Orleans. So do you guys plan on having anything when you're addressing the homeless, to have some type of shelter or facility over there?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're currently in the process of developing kind of a comprehensive plan. So when you're talking about the homeless population, it's really multifaceted. You have, there's a lot of mental illness. There's a lot of substance abuse. So we have to have the capabilities and abilities in order to provide services for that. But the one thing that people don't like to talk about, but I'm not afraid to talk about, is that there is a very heavy criminal element that has embedded themselves in the homeless population. They veil themselves within the homeless population. In fact, Ms. Jennifer Richardson can tell you more about than I can. And when I tell people the types of crimes that take place in some of these homeless camps, they're absolutely shocked and astonished. And that's one of the things that we want to get a handle on. So to answer your question about the actual homeless shelters, we'll have to figure something out with that. You're right. Things like that have never been built in St. George. We don't have any other. Whether you understand it or not, the city of St. George has not one public building that was built by this parish outside of the library and Breck. Not one. So we have some infrastructure things and some building development that have to take place. But once again, I think that's another great opportunity to partner with private organizations and nonprofits and things like that to develop some solutions to that. Thanks for the question.
Time's up.
1 o'clock, perfect.